The best way to give someone a gift they'll never forget is to give a gift they'll always use. American Giant makes clothes that just keep getting better with age, like their iconic full-zip hoodie that's designed to last for decades. And a gift they'll wear for years is a gift that keeps on giving. But American Giant makes a lot more than just hoodies. They have impossibly comfy sweaters, classic tees, soft structured sweatpants, even classic everyday denim. All made right here in the USA, with a quality you'll have to feel to believe. Be a gift-giving giant this holiday season at American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order when you use code GratefulAG23. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com, promo code GratefulAG23.
Good evening, sir.
Gareth, what do you call myself for?
Sir Eddie, you are Leeds United royalty. And welcome, guys, to Legends of the 70s. Joining me in this episode as we take a trip down memory lane is the legend, Mr. Eddie the Last Waltz Gray. I'm absolutely honoured to be talking to you, Eddie. You are royalty in football, in my opinion, sir.
Well, I don't know about that, but it's nice to speak to you.
And let's start your upbringing, Eddie. You were born in January, on the 17th of January 1948 in Glasgow. Talk to me briefly about what it was like growing up in the streets there, the back streets of Glasgow, and being brought into the Celtic household, if you like. Apart from your brother David, he was a Rangers fan, wasn't he?
No, well, he said that he's a Celtic daft now.
Yeah.
He used to say that to annoy me and my brother Frank, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, we grew up in Glasgow, and like a lot of people in Glasgow at that time, and tenement building, and it was a good upbringing though. I went to the local school, St Bonaventures, and played, for the school team when I was young. And then we moved to a big house in a state called Castlemilk. And Castlemilk was the biggest house in the state in Europe. When they moved the people out for the inner city Glasgow, out of the old tenement buildings up to sort of a new build estates.
Yeah.
And that's where basically I was brought up, moved to Castlemilk when I was about 7 or 8, after we last left the Oatlands. In Glasgow, which are all tenement buildings, and it was a good upbringing. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Your footballing DNA, did that come from your mother or your father's side?
Well, probably a bit of both. I mean, my mother's brother, my Uncle Charlie, he played junior football for Scotland, which is equivalent to getting, we're doing here to be an amateur cap, for your country. And my dad would play. My dad must have been a good player, but my dad got wounded in the war and he couldn't play anymore. And people still say to me and my brother Frank, he's a good, but you'll never be as good as your old man. And that's true, I remember, kicking the ball about with my dad when I was young. He could kick the ball, just let's put it that way.
Yeah. It was pretty much jumpers for goalposts, wasn't it, in them days? Any piece of grass or playing football in the roads.
If you had a jumper, if you were lucky enough to have a jumper, jumpers for goalposts. Yeah, it's right. We used to use lampposts as goals, lampposts to the side of the pavement, or the side of the road. And you used to have to be quite nifty, because the police didn't like you playing football in the streets.
Yeah.
So you used to have to be able to run a bit, pick the ball up when they came, get away quickly, then come back when they'd gone.
And that's where you learn your skills. The ball, when it hits the curb, it comes up at different speeds and different angles, doesn't it?
It's not so much the ball hitting the curb.
Yeah.
It's keeping your balance so you didn't fall in the concrete, in the gravel streets.
Yeah.
That was the thing, and I think that's where a lot of boys in Scotland learned how to play the game and, have decent balance, because you didn't want to be falling down in concrete and, scraping your legs all the time. Happened occasionally, but I think that's where most of the boys of that era learned to play. They learned to play in the streets.
I think lots of young uns did. they were street footballers. They'd play over the fields. They'd play anywhere, and not with the case ballers we play with today, with tennis balls and rolled up socks, or literally anything
Well,
that you could kick.
that's what we used to do at school.
Yeah,
We would fill a sock with paper
yeah,
and fill it as tight as we could and play in the playground. Because at times you weren't allowed to play football in school anyway with a proper ball. So you used to have to make it up and play with a bit of paper, but anything you could get your hands on that resembled the ball, you used it.
Your earliest football memories, Eddie, going to watch games of football. Your dad took you down to Parkhead, I'm guessing. So what's your earliest memories of getting excited and going down there and watching the Super Hoops?
Well, getting back to, the early days, watching Celtic winning the Scottish Cup in 1954 against Aberdeen, then getting beat with Hearts,
Yeah.
1956, I'll never forget that. Hearts beat Celtic in the Scottish Cup final. I can remember watching that game vividly. I was with my dad in the old East Stand at Hampden. Hearts had a great team then, and they beat the Celtic. And that was disappointing. But it was just, actually, the thing about it is, I never thought about becoming a footballer, because when I was watching football, probably a bit like supporters now, these guys on the pitch were like gods to me.
Yep.
You just watched them play. I watched some of the great Celtic players, Wally Fernie, Charlie Turley, Bobby Evans, and Bobby Collins, who I ended up with at Leeds, just great players. And it was like, I could never visualise how you became a footballer. I didn't think, I never thought to myself, oh, I'm going to become a footballer. I never thought that till I started, when I get picked for the Glasgow Schoolboys when I was 13, and then I played with the Scottish Schoolboys when I was 14, 15, and you start thinking about it more, and people come knocking at the door, scouts all over the country. But the funny thing is, before I joined Leeds United, I'd been to a few clubs, but there was only one club that I wanted to play for, and that was Glasgow Celtic.
Yeah.
And I used to train at Celtic Park, and I went down to Leeds one weekend for just to visit the place. And I never even knew, I'd never heard of Leeds United, actually. I'll be honest with you, when I first come down, there's a scout in Scotland called John Barr. He told me the young manager, Don Revie, he was trying to build something at the club and he'd like me to go down for a weekend. And as soon as I went down, the manager, Don Revie, met me at the station himself, took me to a hotel. I was only 14 at the time, picked me up the next morning, and I was sitting with all the young boys from all over the country, and he came in, they pulled me out, and he took me training with the first team. So that impressed me.
What was those early days like at Leeds United? Because I know that in modern times, people talk about the United team of the class of '92. We hear a lot of that. We hear a lot of the Busby Babes of '58, God rest their souls. But
Yeah.
we don't hear that much about that great Leeds United youth team that Don Revie assembled. And there were players there like, for instance, Peter Lorimer made his Leeds debut at the age of 15. Norman Hunter was an inside forward. He changed positions and formulated you guys into, in my opinion, the greatest team that British football's ever seen.
Well, we were one of the best teams that I've played. I've no doubt about that. But when I went to the club in 1963, I joined the club in '63. Peter joined the club the year before me. Peter played with the Scottish Schoolboys the year before I did. Peter Lorimer, he was a wonderful player. But so many terrific players. Jimmy Greenough was on the staff at the same time. Yeah. Paul Madeley. And that's no, even talking about players that were there a couple of years older than me, like Paul Reaney, Norman Hunter, and then obviously in 1963, they signed Johnny Giles from Manchester United. Johnny just won the FA Cup with Manchester United, and they came to Leeds, and obviously him and Billy Bremner formed one of the greatest midfield partnerships in the country. But I think that when I look back, and I've always said this, the most important player at the club at that time was a chap called Bobby Collins.
Yep.
Bobby came from Celtic. He went to Everton. He was a great Celtic player, a great Everton player. He came to Leeds United when it was 34, 35, supposedly at the end of the career. And he taught everybody at the club, how to play and what winning was all about. He was a serial winner. And I think every player that played with Bobby would say I think he's the most important player that's ever walked through the gates at Ellen Road.
The wee Barra,
The wee Barra. That's right.
as he was called, wasn't he, Bobby Collins?
Yeah, I watched him playing for Celtic when I was young with my dad, and he was a great Celtic player, as I say, and he went to Everton. He left Everton and everybody thought his career was finished. He came to Ellen Road and he just was unbelievable. His will to win, his determination, his knowledge of the game, his enthusiasm for football. He is the most important player in my eyes that's walked through the gates. You know, they might have been better players, but not many anyway, but it might have been. But I think he's the most important for the point of view of teaching the young players that Don Revie had what winning was all about. You know, he was a serial winner, Bobby.
And when, you look at an inspirational figure, Bobby was that, and he was so much more. And I did a podcast with Johnny Giles, and John said he was a big part of John coming from Manchester United to Leeds, because he said, if it's good enough for Bobby Collins, it's good enough for me. And Bobby was in the middle, as you say, with Billy, but he got a really bad injury, didn't he, against Torino? And John asked the boss, didn't he, to play midfield?
He broke his thigh.
Yeah.
And basically that was a downhill spiral for Bobby in a little bit. He come back for it, but that injury was really serious.
Yeah.
He was never really the same after that. He was still a great footballer, but he wasn't the footballer he was before that injury. I mean, before the injury, he was just unbelievable player. Everything he did it right. He was enthusiastic. It was tough. It was really tough, you know. He was just an incredible character at the football club.
And even in training on runs, if you didn't win in a cross-country, say, for instance, he'd chin you, wouldn't he?
No, he chinned me in a cross-country when I never won for his team. He did, you know. I get coined by an old pro Jim story.
Yeah.
To say we could run in together and we used to, Don used to split us into teams and we'd play everything for points through the pre-season, and Story was in another team. They told me we'd run in together, we get the same number of points for a team, and sure enough, a yard for the line, Story sprinted away from me. I was only 15, and Bobby came in, and I told Bobby what happened, and no sympathy, he just chinned me. That was it. Bobby came from a hard school, and he's probably, as I said earlier, in my mind, he's the most important player ever to walk through the gates of Ellen Road.
And that is so important. I don't think the kids have that upbringing today. You know, you learnt your trade from the ground staff, going into like the youth team to the reserve team and playing with them fantastic senior pros that really managed the team for the gaffer, didn't they? Your team's only as good as your senior pros, isn't it?
I remember, you can remember vividly when I was young, 15, and, you know, like maybe at half time in the game, I used to try and sneak into the corner of the dressing room, and Bobby would be holding court.
Yeah.
And Don Revie just used to stand back and just, you could see him thinking to himself, go on, Bobby, you tell them, you know.
Yeah.
And Bobby was like that. Bobby was, if he didn't think it was been done right, if players weren't pulling their weight, he would tell everybody. And it was when you forget about Bobby, he was only 5'3".
Yep.
He took size 4 in the boot.
Yeah.
But he was a giant of a footballer.
Another giant of a footballer was Dave Mackay that you referenced when Hearts beat you. A young 21-year-old Dave Mackay run the show that day. I mean,
against Celtic.
What a player he was, wasn't he, Dave?
Yeah, well, you know, like Mackay was one of the great players, and I think what people forget about Dave Mackay. I mean, Dave had a reputation of being a hard man, which he was. There's no doubt about it. But Dave Mackay was a great footballer.
Yeah. Right
foot, left foot. He could ping that ball 30, 40 yards. I mean, he was just a wonderful player. And he's such a great character for the game. And like, he's one of the top players I've ever seen, Mackay.
Going into the first team at Leeds United, can you remember your debut?
I played my debut. Funny enough, we play Sheffield Wednesday this weekend, and my debut was against Sheffield Wednesday, Ellen Road, New Year's Day, 1966. It seems a long time ago now. I was 17 at the time, and fortunate enough to play. We won the game, and I scored a goal in my debut. So that was nice to look back and think about that.
So many happy memories from a wonderful career. Luckiest and unluckiest grounds that you played at, Eddie?
I never really used to think about football like that.
Yeah.
What's an unlucky ground? I used to think that if we get beat, it was our fault. Like
Yeah.
we weren't up to it. And I mean, there's like we didn't lose many games, in a season. Like you could count the fingers of both hands how many games we'd lose in a season. I think it was one season we only lost 2 games. And like you just get used to playing. I think I was very fortunate. I mean, Don Revie obviously built the club, and his thoughts to the old chairman then, who was called Harry Reynolds.
Yeah.
And he says to Mr. Reynolds, I know that we've not got a lot of money, but if you just back me a little bit, I'll try and sign all the best young players in the country. And he signed a lot of top-class young players, and we grew up together. And obviously, Bobby Collins, was for Everton. He was a top player. And then another masterstroke for Don in 1963 was signing Johnny Giles from Manchester United. Johnny's probably the best player I played with. He was a wonderful player, and not just a wonderful player, but a great knowledge of the game and a great knowledge of how teams could hurt us when we played and how we could hurt other teams, what areas of the field we could get on top of them. So, when you're growing up and you're playing with players like Collins and Bremner and Giles, who were, wonderful players. Some of they're among the best players that I've ever played the game. And you had like other players like Norman Hunter was some player.
Yeah.
And I mean all the players I played with. I mean, I'm talking about some individuals here, but I'm just talking about the individuals because they were so important to the side.
Yes.
And everybody else could play around about them. I mean, my mate Peter Lorimer, nobody will ever beat Peter's goal scoring record for Leeds. Peter's one of the best goal scorers that I've ever played. So you had, your players like, Giles and Collins, who were great students of the game, and players could play and learn for people like that.
What was the boss like? Because famously he was superstitious. Sometimes didn't take the shackles off you. He was also one of these studious managers that used to have dossiers of other players and teams that you played against. What was he like, Don Revie?
People, you just mentioned it yourself. Teams do that every week now.
Yeah, they do.
They've analysts going to all the games, and Don was way ahead of his time.
Yeah,
way ahead of his time. I mean, what people forget about Don was a great footballer as well.
Yeah, he was.
I mean, when we were young, he used to join in with us. When we were 15 and playing in the car park at lunchtime in between doing your ground staff jobs. Don was footballer of the year.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a great knowledge of the game. And it's funny, like, at Manchester City, when Don was at Manchester City, they introduced a plan, and they called it the Revie plan.
Yep.
And that was all because Don had went to watch England play Hungary in 1963 when Hidegkuti played for Hungary. Now, Hidegkuti he wore number 9, but he never played like a centre forward. He played like a deep lying role.
Yeah.
And Billy Wright, the England captain, didn't know what he was doing because he was used to a number 9 standing up against him.
Yeah.
And Don introduced that plan to Manchester City, and they called it the Revie plan. And it was all because Don had a great knowledge of the game. He watched Hidegkuti playing for Hungary when they beat England 6-3 at Wembley. Then they beat in Hungary in the replay, the other game in Budapest, they beat England 7-1.
Yeah.
And Don took that, that plan, they called it a review plan, but it was all because Don had the great knowledge of the game. Even as a player, he was always a student of the game, and they took that plan to Manchester City, and they called it the review plan. But it was always to do with Don watching the great Hungarian centre forward called Hidegkuti.
And he was very much his family. You were almost like his sons, wasn't he? There seemed to be a really closeness with that Leeds United team and Don Revie.
Well, I think what it was, when Don became manager, in the early 60s, it says to the chairman, I know we've not got a lot of money, but if you back me, I'll try and sign all the best young players in the country. Mm-hmm. And he signed a lot of them.
Yeah. So
when you grow up together, and Don took on a lot of responsibility. He goes up to my house in Glasgow and Peter's house in Dundee. He's speaking to your parents and saying, you're only 15, you're leaving home. Don't worry, I'll look after them. And he did. Yeah. So you all grow up together and you have that bond. And I think that was the thing. I think Johnny Giles says, many years later, Johnny came from Manchester United. Johnny just won the FA Cup with Manchester United, 63. And then he came to Leeds, and he just says the atmosphere, the bond between the players was second to none. Mm. And that was all down to Don.
Yeah.
And getting a lot of the players when they were young, you grow up together, and, everybody felt part of it.
Carpet bowls and bingo. That was a big part of Leeds. You used to have karaoke nights as well, didn't you? Alan Clark was telling me he used to have a song that he'd always sing.
Oh, yeah, you did, yeah. Mine's as I belong to Glasgow.
Okay.
And Peter Lorimer was the roads and the miles to Dundee, because he came from Dundee. No, I don't. And we used to play carpet bowls and bingo. And when we played carpet bowls, Peter and I were the bookmakers. We used to run a book. And all the boys would have a bet on a Friday night before a game, or a Tuesday night before a game, and Wednesday. That was one thing when Don was at the football club. Don took us away before every game.
Yeah.
He believed in the players being together before every game to get that feeling that we're on it together, Hard for the wives at times, because we were always playing, every weekend and every midweek, because we were usually in the later stages of most competitions.
Yes. And Billy's was Nobody's Child, wasn't it?
Yeah. He was it sometimes as well, Billy. No, he was a great player. You just need to look at the partnership him and John Giles had in the middle of the park. Probably one of the best midfield partnerships the country's ever seen. And the funny thing about the two of them is, like two midfield players, it's very unusual. The two of them scored the same number of goals for the team.
115,
115 each for the middle of the park. That's incredible.
I remember Johnny saying to me, tell me who was a defensive midfield player out of me and Billy. We didn't have one. We both scored the same amount of goals. But you were just all great footballers.
I think the thing about it is, the way Johnny and Billy looked upon it, as midfield players. When we were defending,
yep.
They played like defenders.
Yep.
When we were attacking, they were up there joining in. So it was box to box for them, 18-yard box to 18-yard box.
Yep.
And they were just up and down the park, and they had a great understanding. Johnny was a little bit calmer than Billy, let's put it that way. But Johnny was very astute in the game, and at times he had to pull Billy back. If we went a goal down, Billy would forget his midfield duties.
Yes.
I'm going to score the equaliser. 9 times out of 10, Billy did.
Yeah.
But the two of them had a great understanding. But I think Giles was a man dictating how we could play the game, where we could hurt teams. Billy was just off the cuff, but he was brilliant at that.
There was a few off-the-cuff comments between Billy and Johnny with other central midfield players whilst they were on the pitch, weren't they? They'd want to turn to the other one. He's a bit of a headbanger, isn't he?
Oh, there were plenty. Don't worry about that. But the thing about Bremner-Giles partnership, it didn't make any difference who they were playing against.
Yep.
they could hold their own against any midfield players in the country. Just because the two of them were great players. I mean, Billy was one of the greatest Scottish players of all time. Johnny was voted the greatest Irish player of all time. So, you're talking about two world-class footballers coming together, as young players and playing together for 10 years and a great understanding with each other and could dictate games, regardless of who they were playing against.
Absolutely. Most difficult opponents that you come up against, Eddie, or teams as well. Infamously, you had them battles with Chelsea in the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah.
But who's your most difficult opponents?
Well, I never thought about opponents as individuals, like personally. But I thought, the teams you were playing against, you were always going to have a tough game again. Manchester City were a terrific team in their days, as they are now. They had some terrific players, Colin Bell, Mike Somerby, like the top class players. You get your Tottenham Hotspurs, Mackay and Arsenal, the players they had. There was a lot of good teams around then. But I think the thing about our team at that particular time, regardless who we were playing, we always thought we could win the game.
Yeah.
We didn't win every game, but you always had that. I mean, when I was sitting in the dressing room as a young player, I was looking, I'd look around the dressing room and I'd look at the players I was playing with. And I would think to myself, there's no way we can get beat today.
Yeah.
And it's a nice feeling to have that before you go on the pitch. I was just so fortunate enough to play with some of the greatest players that I've played. I've mentioned a few of them, but, you look at, you're talking about, when I get in the team first, big Jack Charlton's playing. And Jack, World Cup winner, Norman Hunter. And you've got Terry Cooper and Paul Reaney and Paul Madeley, who was some player. And that's not talking about the players in the middle of the park like Billy and Johnny. And then you look up front and you've got Peter, top goal scorer of the club of all time. And Alan Clark and Mick Jones, who are just tremendous, So that's the one thing I look back in my career and I think to myself, I was just lucky to play with terrific players.
And you were a terrific player yourself. The tag, we've got to talk about it, Dirty Leeds. But that's really unfair because when that tag come out, it was the disciplinary records of the whole of the Leeds United club, the reserves, the youth. In fact, I think Leeds went some considerable amounts of years before having a player actually sent off. So Leeds' disciplinary record wasn't actually that bad. When you look at this,
there was a lot of clubs that were worse than us.
Oh,
I think the thing about it was as well, I think it came a little bit for the press in the South.
Yes.
At that particular time. Because, if teams wanted to, let's say, mix it in the game, their team could mix it with them, and stand up to them. If they wanted to play football, their team was as good as any team playing football. So I think that's where it came, like just the press having a go. I mean, obviously, we, like a lot of teams then, we had a few players in the side that could look after themselves.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. But every side did then.
Yeah, 100%. Every team had their hard men, their hatchet men, and I guess no more so than Chelsea with Eddie McCready and Chopper Harris.
Well, I mean that's why I was laughing. I did a little bit the other night when the team were playing Chelsea and was doing a little bit with Chopper Harris, and I was laughing, because I think, well, like people used to criticise our team, and you look at the teams that were playing at that time, and Arsenal as well. Arsenal were a tough team then.
Piece of story.
I mean, like that. I mean, the game's changed a lot.
Yeah, it has.
I mean, there's things that happened years ago you wouldn't get away with now. Obviously through television and VAR and everything else like that. But the thing about the side that I was brought up in, I think, I'm going back to the same man again, Bobby Collins. Because Bobby played in tough times. He played with Celtic and a great Everton player, and he came to Leeds. And Bobby realised, if you're going to be a great team, you've got to have physical aspects in the game as well, that you've got to stand up to other teams.
Yeah.
And our team could do that, as well as play, if you want a better expression, pure football.
Yeah. And if you fought one Leeds player, you fought everyone, didn't you?
Pardon?
If you picked upon one Leeds player,
you
picked on the whole team, didn't you?
Yeah, you picked in the team. Yeah, but there was a lot of things like that.
There were.
I think because most of the games we played in those days, we would come out on top.
Yeah.
So that's why we get a reputation. But like that's what I was saying to you. If teams wanted just to play if you want pure football, we could do that, and we could also stand up to sides that want to make it a physical game. There's many games that our team have played, we'd make it a physical game.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of sides like that then.
Absolutely. The 70s was full of teams and players like that. If you could replay one game that you played in your career, what would it be and why? What game?
Well, I never used to really think about individual games like that. I used to think about it as, as a whole. Like where we're at the end of the season. And most seasons, I was very fortunate. We would be in the latter stages of competitions nearly every season for 10 seasons. Like whether it be League Cup, FA Cup, European competitions, and obviously the League Championship. So it was just like every game we played for about nearly 10 years under Don Revie, it was always important.
Yeah.
It was always nearly every game you played, there was something on the game, either to keep your position in the league, to get to the semi-final, the final of a cup competition, European competitions. So, it was always intense. But when you play football at that level, that's what you want. It means you're being successful as a team.
Talk to me about the Burnley game then and them 2 goals. They were exceptional.
Well, yeah. I mean, funny enough, I scored 2 goals that day, but the first goal I scored, to me, that was a better goal.
Right.
Because I had to control the ball quickly, and I seen the goalkeeper off his line. I chipped it over him.
Yeah.
The second goal, like you don't think to yourself, when I pick the ball up wide, I'm going to go by 3 and 4 people or whatever it was and score. It just happened. That just evolved. But the first one, I had to think quickly in my mind and control it quick. And I just seen the goalkeeper. He just stepped off his line. So to me, the first goal I scored against Burnley, that meant more to me than the second goal.
And the second goal, there's one Leeds player lying in the 18-yard box. Was that Albert Johansson?
Albert Johansson.
Yeah, I thought it was, yeah.
That was Albert, yeah. Albert, it's funny, when I first came to the club, Albert Johansson was a terrific player for the club. And Bobby Collins get the best out of Albert because Bobby was a great passer of the ball, and Albert was very quick. Played left wing, very quick. And Bobby would ping balls over the top of defenders, and Albert would be off. Albert was a terrific player for Leeds when I first came down to the football club, and he had a great understanding with Bobby Collins.
If you could revisit one season that you played during your career, what season would you like to go back and replay, Eddie?
Well, I think that's, I think for me that's a difficult one to actually answer. Like when I first came to the club, like in 1963,
Whether you're a morning person or a bedtime procrastinator, everyone deserves a mattress that works for their style. And you'll find the best mattress for you at Ashley. The new Temper-Adapt collection at Ashley brings you one-of-a-kind body-conforming technology, making every sleep tailored to be your best. The collection also features cool-to-the-touch covers and motion absorption to help minimize sleep disruptions from partners, pets, or kids. Shop the all-new Temper-Adapt collection at Ashley, in-store or online at ashley.com. Ashley, for the love of home.
Like, I look back, we went to play in a tournament, I was 15, in France, and we won the tournament, and we beat Barcelona in the final. Things like that. Even although it's only youth level, I look back and the players I played with and the many boys that I played with in that tournament went on to make it. How many of the boys didn't make it? I suppose if I had to pick one game, it would probably be when the club won the league championship and we won it at Anfield.
Yes. Yeah.
So as a one-off game, that game for winning and funny enough, when we won we won the championship at Anfield. Don Revie told us to go towards the Kop, and we were thinking to ourselves, "You kidding on?"
Yeah.
But then when we walked towards the Kop, they all started chanting "Champions."
Yeah.
And it was just one of the most amazing nights in football. But to win the club's first league championship like that, at a place like that, and they had great players then as they've got now, it was a great feeling. But overall, it was just playing for such a great manager, playing with great players, week in, week out, playing with great players, and thinking to yourself, well, if you can't enjoy this, you'd be better packing a game in.
What's your favourite or fondest European memories? Because Leeds got to the final, 73 Cup Winners' Cup final, the 75 European Cup final, cheated out of both of them.
I mean, I think that the both finals we played in the Cup Winners' Cup final, the European Cup final, I think things went against the team.
100%.
Then. I don't think decisions went for us.
Refs.
I mean, the European Cup final, the referee got banned after it.
Yeah.
So I think that tells you everything about that game. But it was just a pleasure to play against, like top players and top teams, and playing Barcelona, Ellen Road, and Cruyff was playing, and they had a lot of terrific players, and beating them. But over a period of 10 or 12 years, we were in Europe every year.
Yeah.
And you're playing against top class players. But, I don't think there's anything to compare with playing against the top sides in England at that time.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of great teams in England at that time, a lot of great players. And it was tough every week to get a result.
Your FA Cup winners medal, 1972, when Leeds won it in the centenary. What a fantastic achievement that was. I know the season after got beat by Sunderland in 73, but 1972, what a game.
1972 was great because, we should have won the Cup in 70 when we played Chelsea.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, we drew at Wembley, they got a late equaliser. We went ahead in the replay at Old Trafford. We were probably the better side in both games.
Yeah, he was.
The Arsenal game was a tougher game, funny enough. Although Chelsea beat us, the Arsenal game was actually a tougher game. But to win the Centenary Cup final, and it was always, when I first came into the club, the team lost the FA Cup final against Liverpool in 1965 at Wembley, and I was there watching the game. And, for the players that played in that game, there's a few players still that played in that game that played when we won the Cup against Arsenal. It must have felt great for them, to actually play in a cup final is a great achievement, but to win it, and we won the League Cup final against Arsenal as well, before we won the FA Cup final against them. So to win the trophies, the League Cup, the FA Cup, European trophies, I think it just goes to show you the strength of the squad that Don Revie had assembled at Ellen Road.
And that was the thing in them days. You won and you achieved all these fantastic feats with a squad of no more than 15, 16. There was one substitute.
Players.
Yeah, one substitute.
Yeah.
Had you have been able to have the squad that, say, for instance, a Manchester City have got today with winning the treble and winning possibly a double treble, that could have been what Leeds United achieved. But sometimes you play too many games and the injuries caught up with you.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about games there. Like I remember, going back a few years, we played the 1st of April, the 2nd of April, and the 4th of April. All big games.
Yeah.
And one of the games was the semi-final European Cup against Celtic, and you're playing big games. So you're playing 3 top games in 4 days. That wouldn't happen now.
No.
You would get at least a bit 3 or 4 days break before you played games. So that was the difference then. But it was the same for all sides. That's just how football was then. And I think the thing about it is we were playing so many games because we're successful.
Yes.
And we're in the latter stages in most competitions we played in. And that was a great feeling to be able to do that.
In every dressing room, you had comedians, ladies, men, dressers, etc., etc. Who were the great characters in the Leeds United dressing room? What were the boys like? What were the characters of the lads?
Oh, they were terrific. They were all a lot of different type of
Yeah,
characters. I mean, Billy Browne was probably the best. Just
yeah,
let's put it that way.
yeah,
I mean, we used to go across the road for lunch every day, and there'd be 14 years, 15 years. And we used to toss up. If
yeah.
you ended up losing a toss, with only 2 or 3 left, you had to pay for the whole lunch. And if one of the Scottish boys lost, Billy would have a cup of tea. If one of the English boys lost, he'd have a 3-course lunch, 2 Kit Kats, and 2 Kit Kats to take home for the kids. And that was the rules, though. Now, Billy was a character. He was a great player. He was a character, Billy.
Was that Sheila's calf?
He must have been hard to control for Don in the early days.
Yeah, I bet. Because Don played with him, didn't he?
Pardon?
Don played with Billy in the early
Don
days, didn't
played
he?
with Billy.
Yeah.
Yeah, Don played with Billy.
Mm.
Billy came to the club. Billy played with the Scottish schoolboys in 1958.
Yeah.
So Billy came to the club, 4 years before I did, 5 years before I did. Billy was a bit older, and he played with Don. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Don knew him, and he knew all about him. And I think the best thing Don did to control Billy a bit was make him captain of the team.
Yeah.
Because even when Don was making him captain, I don't think Don would actually think Billy would have been captain material.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yes.
Very fiery, and
Yeah.
could lose it, and but it just goes to show you how clever Don was. That was an inspirational moment, I think, for Don to make Billy captain. And Billy was the type of player he would revel in that. He would love that. I'm captain of Leeds United, give Billy a big lift and make him feel like he'd think he was even better than he thought he was. And he thought he was a good player, and he was a great player.
The calf that you referred to, was that Sheila's calf?
Yeah, Sheila's calf across the road. Terry Orris, it was Terry Orris' mother-in-law when he was with Christine, and we used to go across there every day for lunch, and it was right across the road for the ground.
Yeah,
and we used to always get into the back room. The table would be all set, and with some laughs in there, but it was terrific. I mean, that all helped the spirit of the team at that particular time, and everybody was in it together.
What was the best bit of advice that you were ever given, Eddie?
Probably the best bit of advice was first of all, when my dad was living, but when talking about the professional game with Don Revie, he used to say to us, never forget concentration, confidence, and courage. He used to always say the 3 C's.
Yep.
When you play football, concentration level.
Yeah.
And that's very important in football. The concentration level, the courage to use your ability, and the confidence to use your ability. And Don, like, I know our team probably in the early days had a bit of a reputation of being dour at times, but that wasn't Don's way.
Yeah.
Don loved to play football, and he loved the players to express themselves, and so I was fortunate to play for a manager like Don Revie, who I thought was one of the best managers that's ever been in this country.
And after you won the title at Liverpool, you won the title in 1974. You went on that fantastic unbeaten run. Now, before the season started, Don had a vision, didn't he? He wanted you guys to go unbeaten for the whole of the season.
Well, he thought it was possible.
Yeah,
and it was possible, actually, because we never lost many games. I think we lost, a few games, But Don had a great belief in the players that had assembled at Ellen Road. And quite rightly so, when you look at the players he had at Ellen Road. I mean, as I said earlier, some of the best players that have played the game.
Yeah.
And a lot of players that Uh, if, a lot of the players, I would think when Don first came to the club, would probably never have thought they'd have achieved what they did.
Yeah.
And it was a lot. It was down to Don, like making players feel how good they were. And I mean, when you look at certain players, Norman Hunter was an inside forward.
Yeah.
Terry Cooper was an outside left. And Don, what Don did. I mean, the funny enough, I played for the team in the left wing. I'd never played left wing in my life till I came to Leeds.
Yeah.
And it was only Don saying to me one day, Eddie, I'm trying to make a team up. Would you mind having a go outside left? I was a midfield player, the old left half position, midfield. And Don says to me, I would like you to have a go outside left. And I says, that's fair enough. And I played outside left. So I never considered myself as a winger. I considered myself a frustrated midfield player all my career.
What was your highest high and your lowest low during your career?
Lowest low was probably, for a selfish point of view, I got a bad thigh injury when I was 15.
Yes.
And it troubled me all the way through my career. I had about 5 operations on it. I mean, I would have been a lot better player if it wasn't for my thigh injury. And I learned how to play with it. That was the biggest disappointment in me. For a personal point of view in my career, I never really get the chance to, I don't think, perform at the level that I thought I was capable of performing just through this thigh injury. And for a match point of view, probably losing the cup final against Sunderland.
Yeah.
When we were hot favourites to win the game. But all credit to Sunderland that day. They came out and they did the job, and they probably deserved it.
I think if Leeds would have scored early, they'd probably absolutely smashed them.
Oh, well, we would have. I mean, Jim Montgomery had one of the days.
That double save.
Yeah. But in general, they played very well, But, I mean, that's the great thing about football. It's so unpredictable at times.
It was literally a David versus Goliath, and you're absolutely right. Football just churns up so many results that you think, dear me. But that's why we love the game so much.
That's why people go to watch it every week.
Absolutely, yeah. And players that get you off your seat these days, because back in our days it was all terracing, of course, and Eddie Gray that's taking on his fullback. That was a sight worth seeing, and that's what you used to do in them days. It was all about beating you back, wasn't it? Beating you back, making things happen, play the ball forward.
Well, it's what Don used to say to me, Eddie, when you get the ball, just run at them.
Yeah.
I don't care if you lose the ball 9 times out of 10, because the 10th time you'll create something.
Yep.
And it'll lead to a goal or whatever. And that's just how, we played the game. But you can only do that if you're playing and you've got top class players on your side. I mean, that's what all great teams are about.
You must have had some fun making your song, Marching On Together. Which is the My Life with Leeds United, your autobiography, Mr. Eddie Gray. Great picture of you on the front cover, by the way. I'm halfway through the book, absolutely loving it. But that was Paul Trevelyan, wasn't it? Sock tags.
Paul Trevelyan, yes.
Yeah, and Marching On Together.
The Beaver. Yeah. I mean, funny enough, he was at Ellen Road, not that long ago, a couple of years ago. He'd done these bronze little statues of the players, little caricatures, and they're up in the stand, east stand at Ellen Road. He came to Ellen Road and had a laugh with a few of the boys. But I mean, we were the first team to do like a warm up together.
Yeah.
And this was all Paul Trevelyan's idea.
Yeah.
Because at that particular time, I think you'll know yourself, the team, people ever thought the team was dour and never get the credit they deserved. But once we did this warm up and we done it in unison, the first team to do it, people started to think, and we wore the sock tabs, and people started to think in the team in a different light then. They're not bad and they can play. So that was partly down to Trevelyan, and Don Revie getting together. and formulating something that would catch fire the imagination of the fans.
And also, you used to come onto the pitch, didn't you, and wave to the crowd. You
Oh
kick
yeah, that was
balls
it.
into the crowd as well.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was
yeah. Well,
revolutionary.
yeah, that was all part of it,
Yeah.
And it was all Paul Trevelyan. He had ideas, and him and Don sat down together, and we could do this and do that. I mean, and that like I think that was the start of people thinking a little bit different about the team and Don Revie and the club in general.
Absolutely. It was. I think it was Paul being over in America and all these different things that he had inside his head. He did take it because he's a Tottenham fan. He took it to Bill Nicholson and he sent him to Don Revie. Sorry,
it worked for our club. It did work for our club at that particular time.
Tell me about it.
And then other side started to do a warm up, and and then that's where the teams all warm up together now. The players were, whereas before Trevelyan, players would run on as individuals, do their own warm up, and just go on with the game, and it just all evolved for then.
The 1972 FA Cup semi-final against Birmingham City at Hillsborough.
Yeah.
You both wore your away kit. Can you remember why?
No, I don't. I don't remember, but I know we did. I think they were going to clash. I don't know, and they may have just decided, well, both teams will wear their away kit. I don't know, but I mean, it didn't do us any harm that day. That semi-final against Birmingham. We probably won that game quite comfortably.
Yeah, you did.
So, but I can't remember why we did that or what the reason was. I can only just presume that the teams might have came to an agreement. Well, we'll both wear away kit, just in case there was any argument who was going to wear their home kit.
But that day you were superb. I remember Johnny telling me it was one of the best that he felt that Leeds played in that semi-final, and 72 in particular. He thought it was a great succession of games that you played in 1972.
Well, I think in 1972, 71, 72, probably the team were at their peak.
Yeah.
And played some great football. I mean, it didn't make any difference who we were playing. We always felt very comfortable. We could go out and win the game comfortably.
Yeah.
And I think Johnny's always says that he thinks that, the best years were between 1970 and 1973, when we were probably at the peak as a team.
Your most prized possession that you received through your playing days, Eddie, what would that be?
Well, I would think winning the first league championship.
Yeah.
That the championship medal for then. It meant a lot to the club. I mean, the first league championship they'd ever won. And when you're playing 42 games, whatever it is, on the season, you come out on top. That's not a fluke. It's not like playing maybe a one-off game in a cup tie, and you maybe scrape through. You're playing for a lot of games, a period of time, and you're successful over that period of time. You're consistent, and you prove you can match yourself against most sides that play. So I think going back to winning the first league championship, I think that would be the pinnacle for the team point of view and an individual point of view for me.
You played with great managers, played for a great manager, and you played with great players. Is there a manager that you would have liked to have played for during your career, or a player that you would have liked to have played with?
Well, manager, I did get a chance to play for a manager that I would, great respect for, but he never stayed long enough, and that was Jock Stein.
Yes, yeah.
When Jock came to the club.
Yep.
If a player that I would love to have played with, I can only say Jimmy Johnson.
What a player!
Yeah, he was some player. I mean, that's what it must have been great for players like Bertie Auld and Bobby Murdoch, who were two great midfield players. To get the ball and get to Jimmy. And then Jimmy would just do his stuff, He
was a defender's dream, wasn't he, Jimmy Johnston? Just go and have it, Jim.
Oh, right. I know.
We don't light a cigar up, couldn't we, on the halfway line?
Jimmy was some player. He was just tremendous. nearly impossible to get the ball off him.
Yeah.
I mean, when Celtic beat us in the semi-final of the European Cup at Hampden, they beat us in the second leg.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just unbelievable that
Mm.
night. He was a great player.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the type of player that, that even, I would go, I'd pay money to watch him.
Yeah, you would. Yeah.
He's just some player, So he's right up there with, the best players that have played the game. Jimmy. He was a Celtic player through and through, and they won the European Cup, and he was just a great player. And they had a great midfield player playing with him as well then, Bobby Murdoch.
Yes.
Bobby was a great player. And he knew Jimmy's strengths, and he kept Jimmy in the game. He kept making sure Jimmy got the ball, and then used to give Jimmy the ball, and then he could have a rest for 5 minutes.
Absolutely. Was you there with Scotland when he took the boat onto the loch?
No, thank goodness. I know all about it, but I wasn't there. Yeah.
I mean, that was some boat trip, that was, wasn't it?
Well, Jimmy was a character. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But what a player,
And often gets missed out when people talk and look back in, time, world-class players and the greats. Jimmy Johnston was one of the great wingers, natural-born footballers ever to put a kit on, wasn't he?
Oh, Jimmy Jimmy was one of the best players ever.
Yeah.
I mean, he was just a great player.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look what he did for Glasgow Celtic, and he just... He loved Celtic, Jimmy.
Yeah.
He was a Celtic man, and he just loved playing for Celtic. And he was voted the greatest Celtic player of all time.
Yeah.
So that says everything, because there were a lot of great players played for Celtic.
And who would be the best Rangers player, Slim Jim?
Jim Baxter would probably be up there. Yeah. He would take a bit of beating, Jim Baxter. Jim Baxter was a great player. There was a lot of terrific players in Scotland then, because the game was a little bit different then. The Scottish teams could hold on to their players a little bit more.
Yes.
But when the Premier League started, then, that's when the players started to drift away, to Scotland. I mean, one of the greatest signings, and it was a great signing, was when Tottenham Hotspur signed Dave Mackay in the early 60s.
Yep.
Because Dave was a great Hearts player, and and Tottenham signed him, and everybody knows what Dave Mackay did for Tottenham.
Yeah.
But then later on, the Scottish teams before the Premier League come in, they could hold on to their players a little bit easier.
Yeah.
It's more difficult for Scotland now. Go on.
No, I was going to say, what's your favourite memory of putting on that Scotland jersey and listening to the crowd singing Flower of Scotland and playing in them home internationals? It must have been fantastic.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think, your Scotland-England games are always going to be big matches. And for any Scottish players, that was always the pinnacle, to play against England either at Wembley or play against them at Hampden, So I think for most boys growing up in Scotland, it was playing against England. In those days, things have changed a little bit now. There's so many European competitions and world football, but the England-Scotland game's always a big game.
If you could have a one-to-one with anybody, dead or alive, so like from the history of the planet being formed to now, who would it be with and why?
Who would it be now? Are you talking of football? I tell you, Muhammad Ali.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I was a big boxing fan when I was younger, and I just loved Muhammad Ali. He was a great fighter. It'd been quite nice to sit down with him and just listen to him. Well, you wouldn't have got a chance to say anything, would you?
No, I mean, I remember because he used to do a lot of stuff, didn't he? Particularly in the ring, but outside the ring. On Parkinson, Mohamed Ali.
Yeah.
Remember, And Brian Clough, he's like, Clough, I've had enough. And Cloughie was there. Cloughie said, I want to fight him. I mean, a great character, Brian Clough. We've got to mention Brian, the 44-day stay at Leeds United. It was never going to happen. It was always going to end in tears, wasn't it?
Well, yeah. But, I mean, later on, Brian says to me, after he left Leeds, he says, I done it wrong.
Yeah, he did.
He says, I could have done it differently. Because he come in like a bull in a china shop. And, you're saying to top-class players, throw your medals in the bin. And, that doesn't get done well. Just, he came just after we'd won the league as well.
Yep.
And I think that but even by that, I mean, I've got to say, Brian Clough was one of the greatest managers this country has ever produced.
Yeah.
I mean, my brother Frank went and won the European Cup with him.
Yeah, he did.
At Forest. And he was a great manager. Probably at Leeds, I think because him and Don didn't go on too well together.
Yes.
And I think he came in with that attitude that I'm going to do things differently and, so it just didn't work for him. But I have great respect for Brian Clough and what he did for the game in this country. Did
you ever watch The Damned United, Eddie? What was your take on that?
It was just a movie.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? There wasn't much truth in it.
No, it was just a movie. That was it, So just watched it and, enjoyed it for what it was.
Sadly, though, when people watch movies like that about something that really happened, they tend to think that everything that was said in that was true, and it was just a figment of people's imagination, based on a little bit of truth.
Yeah, I mean, there was sparkling, little bits there and here and there that were true, but in general, it was fiction based in fact.
Absolutely. If you wasn't a football player, Eddie, what do you think you would have become?
I've not got a clue.
Really?
I don't have a clue. I mean, it's all I've done since I was 15.
Yeah.
So, well, before I was 15, I mean, I played with Glasgow schoolboys when I was 13 and the Scottish schoolboys, obviously, when I was 15 and came to Leeds. I just don't know. I mean, that sometimes when I think about that, I actually shiver a little bit. And I thought, what would I have done? Because, you're obsessed with football.
Yeah.
But even then, when I was younger, I never thought about how you became a footballer.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys were like gods to me. When I used to go to Celtic Park and watch Scotland play, you never actually think, I'm going to play at that level one day.
Yeah.
But it only happens when, clubs start to come after you when you're 14, 15, and then you join a football club and you realise that you've got the talent to play the game.
What hobbies did you have? Did you play golf? Were you a cricketer?
No, we used to play golf. We liked to golf.
Yeah.
We used to play golf. We always had a club championship every year.
While you were at Leeds?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, golf was a big game because Don Revie was a big golfer,
Right, okay.
Don won they used to have a professional footballers championship every year, golf.
Okay.
And Don won it twice.
Blimey.
Don at one time, Don was playing off 2 handicap.
Wow.
Don was a very good golfer. So we played a lot of golf. And we used to have an annual championship at the club every year. And Lorimer Peter and I ran the book. We were the bookmakers at the championship. We got stung a couple of times with a couple of sharks, that we didn't know about. And all the boys lumped on them,
Away from football and golf, what did you used to watch on the television? I mean, Top of the Pops was a staple. We used to have things like the Sweeney and Minder and
no.
Morecambe and Wise. Was you not a TV person?
I like Morecambe and Wise. Morecambe and Wise, but no, I when younger days I wasn't a great television man,
Yeah.
You're too obsessed with the football and playing football and watching games. And I mean, we used to travel. Me, Peter Lorimer, my mate Jimmy Lumsden. Peter drove a car when he was 17. I don't know how he got away with it, but he did. And we used to drive up and down the country to watch games. I remember one night, me, Joe Jordan, Jimmy Lumsden, Peter, we went to we went up to watch Joe, and Gordon McQueen was with us. and we were leaving Hampden, and we lost the car keys, and we had to get a taxi back for Glasgow. Because we had to be back for the next morning training.
Yeah.
Because Don didn't know we were going to the game. He wouldn't have liked that, you know. So we had to get a taxi back. That cost us a few quid.
I bet it did. Finally, is there any song or songs that remind you of those halcyon days of the 70s?
Well, if you're talking about when I was younger,
yeah,
you know, it was We Are the Celtic Supporters.
Yeah.
But, you know, like, there's nothing better for me now than standing at Ellen Road before the games and listening to the crowd singing Marching On Together. Yeah. I mean, it's great when the whole crowd sing it as well. So that's great.
And after the game, I was watching the game against Leicester recently, and they put on I Predict a Riot. And I got to say, I mean, that Leeds United crowd, they are fantastic supporters.
They are fantastic. I mean, I've got to say, the atmosphere at Ellen Road just now is the best I've ever known it. I think I've said that. You know, it is. I mean, the atmosphere is tremendous. I mean, the crowd are terrific. They're right behind the team, right behind the manager. I've got to say, I think the manager's doing a great job, Daniel. Yeah, doing a terrific job. And hopefully, we'll be back among the big boys soon.
Well, that's where you deserve to be.
That's where we want to be.
And also another Gray. I was talking to Huddy today, and he says that boy Archie's some player, Paul. Another Gray out the mould.
He's doing very well, and hopefully there'll be a few more to come.
There's a little lad named Harry as well behind him, isn't there?
Harry's there, yep, and Harry will be probably joining the staff soon, and I've got a grandson that plays at the academy as well. You know,
how old is he?
He's about a little bit younger. He's younger. But he can play. So hopefully, I'd like to see them all playing together for Leeds.
That'd be fantastic, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. What a wonderful trip down memory lane, Eddie. Can I thank you so much? And I was absolutely right. You are royalty, and I am right in calling you sir. Thank you so much. And good luck to all at Leeds United.
Thank you very much.
Lovely.
Thank you
for your time, Eddie. Thank you. Thanks for listening, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Whether you're a morning person or a bedtime procrastinator, everyone deserves a mattress that works for their style. And you'll find the best mattress for you at Ashley. The new Tempur-Adapt collection at Ashley brings you one-of-a-kind body-conforming technology, making every sleep tailored to be your best. The collection also features cool-to-the-touch covers and motion absorption to help minimize sleep disruptions from partners, pets, or kids. Shop the all-new Tempur-Adapt collection at Ashley, in-store or online at ashley.com. Ashley, for the love of home.